So I'm going to try to step us back and kind of walk forward from when you went from this transition into alternative energy. So we're going to touch on that a bit because we are a Clean Energy Academy, and we see some parallels with, interesting enough, cures for the body, treatments for the body, and alternative clean energy, abundant energy. Are there any particular projects or trends that you see in alternative energy that you think looks promising? Whether it's hydrogen generators or solid state, is there anything that kind of piques your interest in that realm?
Yeah, there's a lot that piques my interest. First of all, there's ways of increasing efficiency of systems that exist now, like my capacitive battery charger charges a battery twice as fast with half of the electricity that a normal inductive charger does.
Wow.
Just to say, there's a bunch of things that can increase efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are several inventors over the decades that have shown that there is an effect. We're talking about Edwin Gray, Joseph Newman, and Bedini, and a few like that have shown that there's a collapsing magnetic effect that can be used to generate electricity. It's like you use a very small amount of electricity to create a vortex field in space, and then you just stop that electricity and the vortex field collapses. And you can gain more energy from that collapse than it takes to make the effect. So you can spin this up and then gather it. So there seems to be several inventors that have figured out how to do that in various ways, and I'd like to get back into that research. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of heat ones, like even Tesla back in the day figured out a heat where you could generate energy from just the heat, ambient heat in the air.
Wow.
I've got something similar to that I'm building in my own home right now.
Mm-hmm.
I finally have a home that I can do it in. And so when I'm done with that, it'll just take heat from the air. And in this case, I have a solar assist heat pump. So there's solar panels on the roof that are facing the sun. And when the sun's rays are shining on them, even in the wintertime, it's gathering the solar energy and storing it as heat. And then I can turn that heat into electricity using low temperature phase change. Mm-hmm. So there's ways that can be done. And that follows somewhat of Tesla's technology. Mm-hmm. Tesla's like a hero and mentor of mine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then another one that's interesting, based back kind of getting into the Brown's gas technology, is something that Al Throckmorton calls the Lord's pump.
Okay.
And I'm not sure why he called it the Lord's pump, except he's a very Christian man, and he's trying to make a pump that can pump water in third world countries for people who don't have water. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that it's a pistonless pump, and the way that works is that when you have an explosion, after an explosion, there's usually a vacuum. Okay. And the vacuum sucks water in from one side through a check valve into this cylinder that's up and down. So the water's filling the cylinder, and then as the water's coming in, you're also putting in a fuel at the top, say up a spark plug. And then when the water level gets to a certain point, you ignite the fuel, and it pushes pressure on that water that's in there, which can go this way because there's a check valve. But another pipe going out this way has a check valve, and so it pushes that pressure down and pushes the water out that way. Wow. So you're burning the fuel to do that. And if you combine three different technologies, like Aaron Murakami's plasma ignition system, which means a very large spark with a tiny amount of electricity, cold fog system, so that you can actually essentially burn water. It's in its liquid form, and Brown's gas, which acts like a catalyst to do the difference. So a tiny amount of Brown's gas, a water fog, and a plasma ignition, you actually can generate up to 10 times more energy, potential energy, by pumping water than it takes in electricity to make all the system work, according to what Al Throckmorton is saying. So then at that point, you would have something you could make a self-running machine. You could have the water pumped up to a height that would come down and turn a generator, which would light normally, do all the things electricity normally does. And then there's a pool down below that you're sucking the water back up from with the pump, using less energy to pump the thing uphill. Maybe something like that'll work.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a bunch of things out there, and I think that there have been, like T. Henry Moray, a bunch of people who actually have done this, actually made, in that case, a 50 kilowatt machine
Yes.
but
Yeah.
it was smashed and destroyed, and machines like that are very difficult to rebuild because it took decades for the man to put enough of the stuff together, and he just didn't have the wherewithal to rebuild it. So there's
Yes.
been a lot of stuff. But then getting on to more of the modern science thing, thorium is a huge. If they took the nuclear industry and just went to thorium instead of various uranium and plutonium and stuff, thorium is very easy to work with and very not
Doesn't leave so much of the waste. Is that
right?
Yeah.
And it's still got shoot hundreds of years that it can do, and you could put a thorium powered reactor in a car and it would never require fuel again, and as long as it ran. And
Wow.
they do make like magnetic bearings and things, so vehicles could get 1,000,000 miles to a use and never even have to use fossil fuels. And when you're parked at home, your thorium reactor could power the house, because generally speaking, the power plants for vehicles are bigger than what is necessary for a house. So you could even power 2 or 3 homes just from one automobile. It's stuff like that. The technology exists to do amazing things, but it's just not used because it's not profitable. It's like when, So
it's kind of left to us DIY developers to actually come up with a solution and share it among other people.
And that's where it will come from.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, that's what'll happen, and it'll have to be people who don't have a greedy the greedy thing, because that's what they use to suppress all these ones. Because I think it's been done several times.
Yes,
I'm not been smart enough to do it yet, but I've been gathering information and standing on the shoulders of giants. So the people that share are the people that help others grow, and then what'll happen is a whole bunch of people will be able to do it, and then it won't be able to be stopped. It'll become just commonplace. If we're going to continue with the fossil fuel, you should definitely be using both the Brown's gas and water injection because first of all, fossil fuel requires a moisture to burn. Most mechanics and a lot of drivers know that when the dew starts to fall out of the air in the evening, their vehicle suddenly runs smoother. It's because it's getting a little more water moisture in the air. So every vehicle should have at least a simple water injection system. And then when you add the Brown's gas, then you're getting into that thing where we're just talking about with the Lord's pump, where you have some water droplets and you have the and stuff. And all those things together make the fuel combustion much more efficient. So all of a sudden you're cutting your fuel consumption in half.
Okay.
So you can immediately stop the emissions that are going off for global warming and whatever, and pollution and what have you, by half. So if you're going to continue to use fossil fuel, which in any case there would be an interim period, then absolutely that would have to happen. And then if a person goes off into hydrogen fuels or the which there are engines like the Bork engine and stuff that can run on hydrogen fuel quite nicely. If you evolve into that, well, then you don't need the electrolysis so much.
Right.
But there are but also, if you're going to be with the fossil fuels, you should burn it efficiently. And one of the ways to do that is to turn the fuel completely into a vapor before it burns, because only vapor fuel burns, hydrocarbon fuels. So the liquid fuel, it's like a candle. Okay, you put the candle, it's a solid paraffin, and when the flame is burning, it makes a little pool of liquid, but that little pool of liquid does not burn. It does not explode. It does not anything. It just runs up the wick and when the heat turns that liquid to a vapor, then the vapor burns. So that it's the same with any other hydrocarbon fuel. It has to be mixed it has to be vapor and mixed with oxygen before it can burn. So if you do that before it goes into the engine, then the engine can burn very efficiently, and you can get up to 10 times the fuel economy. 10 times.
That's impressive.
So these are the kinds of things that should be done and aren't done, and the technology isn't new. I found fuel savers that worked on this principle of vaporizing the fuel. In fact, one of them was made by Benz of Mercedes-Benz back in the 1800s, and it was never put on the vehicles because it's more profitable to burn the fuel. Make the vehicles burn as much fuel as possible, which comes from one of my pet peeves, which is called a catalytic converter. Because I just have this idea. I have this idea that it's better to burn the fuel in the engine rather than in the exhaust system. I just think that it'll propel the car better.
That seems to make sense.